All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach J.K. McLeod, and we are kicking off episode number 272 ish. I just totally lost what number we were on of Help Me Understand. Before getting into today's episode, where I want to provide you with what I believe is a very straightforward and simple to understand framework with taking in information without drowning in said information. I always want to say thank you for choosing to press play on Help Me Understand. You have plenty of podcast content that you could be consuming right now, and maybe this is just yet another one in your queue. Either way, I truly, truly appreciate you listening to Help Me Understand. All right, so title of today's, or the working title at least, we'll see if this holds, is how to take in information without completely drowning in it. So let me give you some context here from my perspective as someone who has been a coach for now coming up on a little bit over 10 years at this point. I was just thinking about this not too long ago, where it finally hit me that, oh yeah, I started this back in about 2015 is when I first officially started coaching people. So I have officially crossed the 10-year mark here. So um, something that I have noticed over a number of years, and I don't believe that I'll be the first person that you've heard this idea from or this statement from, and I certainly won't be the last, is that the problems that we currently have now are typically not due to a lack of information. In fact, I believe that we have more access to information than we have ever had before. One of the first things that comes to mind for me is, as I was growing up, it was a really big deal to have the World Book encyclopedias. So we had a whole bookshelf where we had the entire set of World Book encyclopedias. And for a little aside in history, I remember my dad telling me a story about how big of a deal it was for he and his siblings as they were growing up to be able to have a full set of World Book encyclopedias. For reference, my dad was born in the early 1950s. And he said that my grandmother uh, would save up money so that when she was able to, she could buy another volume of the World Book encyclopedias. So either based on availability or funds, I'm not sure if it was one or the other or a combination of both, because circumstances were very, very different back then. What she would do is have enough money saved up to be able to buy yet another volume until she could put the whole set together. So just thinking about the evolution of availability of information, just even within my own family lineage, of going from buying encyclopedias one or maybe two at a time to then a full book of encyclopedias to then me being introduced to the World Wide Web. When's the last time you actually heard the internet called the World Wide Web? So the World Wide Web and AOL and dial-up internet, like I can hear the sound in the background right now. If I had some production value, I'd add it just so you could get nostalgic, because Spotify tells me that the average listener probably is of age to remember that. So thinking that evolution to then laptops, and then now to myself and my kids, then just walking around with essentially having unlimited access to information at the press of a thumb. Like you don't even need to use both hands. You can use like a couple of fingers. It's just crazy. So back to the point, I really don't think that at this point we have a underinformed issue. I believe that in fact we tend to be overexposed to information between podcasts and social media and different articles and all sorts of different programs, be they TV programs or now there's a mounting evidence that a lot of our information or in shows and things that we're watching, especially in the younger generation, are now YouTube based shows. I mean, the industry has definitely changed. I believe that we're pretty much overexposed. And what I find is that people still feel like they're somewhat behind. And a very common phrase that I'll hear is, well, I know what to do, I have access to the information. So why does it just feel like heavier every single year? And there's a metaphor or analogy that, and actually a metaphor that really comes to mind from a book that I read called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And if I remember correctly, McKeown is spelled McKeown. I believe that looks like McKeown. However, it's pronounced McEwen, and I do my best not to tell people how to properly pronounce their last names, as somebody who has been told in the past, as I was growing up, that I was mispronouncing my own last name. People would say, "Oh, J.K. McLeod." I was like, "No, it's McLeod," and they would ask me, "Are you sure?" So that's a whole nother story. Anyways, so back to the point. In the book Essentialism, there's a snippet where the author, Greg McKeown, talks about a sponge. And I remember when I read this particular portion that it hit different. It was just a different way to describe a sponge that I hadn't thought about. And my takeaway or my translation was that he described a sponge as something that wasn't designed to really store everything that it absorbs. So it doesn't just soak in water. It takes in the water or whatever the liquid or the substance is and when you squeeze it, then it releases what it doesn't need. So if you even think about, say you were going to wash the car and you use one of those big soapy sponges, you soak the sponge with soap and water and whatever your cleaning solution is, but typically you squeeze a little bit of it out and then you go ahead and you get to work. So if you tried to hold on to absolutely everything in the sponge, it would stop working. So I believe that this can be a helpful way to really visualize all of the information that you have coming your way. And based on the nature of where I spend the majority of my time coaching folks, we're primarily talking about the overall fitness and health industry, where there's just, in my observation and just me as a person, a client in the fitness and health industry, just an overwhelming amount of information coming from every direction. So I believe that information ideally should really just be moving through you, not completely just piling up uh, against you. So a phrase that comes to mind for me as I want to pass on to you a couple of tips and even possibly like a helpful filter for you to use is one that I learned from a friend of mine. His name is Jay Skibbins, and he's actually a co-parent coach. And stick with me for a second, because you might be like, what did you learn from a co-parent coach that helps you with information and how to properly figure out like what you do need to respond to and what you don't? Well, Jay teaches he teaches co-parents how to basically develop themselves, and I'm paraphrasing in my perspective. He teaches co-parents how to develop themselves and take ownership over their behaviors in order to meet the ultimate goal of parenting their children. Long story short. And one of the phrases that he uses and has used for years, and I first came into contact with Jay as part of a dad's group. He said, "Immediacy is the enemy." And ever since he said that, and he's done some content around it. Again, his name is Jay Skibbins. If you look him up, the last name is spelled Skibbens. He says immediacy is the enemy. And in the context that he has shared this, in both his content and in our dad's group, the context of it is when you get a text from your co-parent, or you get a message from or they call you, or you may see them in person and they say something, believing that you have to immediately respond typically does not have the best outcome. So again, he uses this phrase, immediacy is the enemy. Like, we can take a pause, we can take a beat, take a moment. You don't have to respond right away. And I think about the intake of information very much the same way. Every new piece of information can, if you let it, come with this unsaid pressure that you need to quickly act on that piece of information. Like, folks tend to assume that speed to implement that particular information is immediately going to equal progress. And I have found that to rarely be true. So immediacy will just blindly turn information that you've received into this obligation that you now have to go put it into place. And from my perspective, that obligation is what starts to pull people off of the primarily solid routine that they tend to have. And then that's where they start to slowly drift off course. And then a year and a half later, they're wondering, how did I get so completely just off track with where I was when it comes to my fitness and my health routine? So, what I recommend doing is trying to implement some steps so that you can filter through when that information comes. First, remember, immediacy is the enemy. And then I'm going to teach you a little filter that I've got here. I do want to mention here that this is this is a message that is coming from the heart here, because as a coach who continues to learn, whether it comes to new training methods, different ways to coach individuals, more research that's coming out. In fact, I'm looking over. I've got a paper that I just printed out not too long ago, like not a piece of paper, but many pieces of paper, a research paper, um, or I believe a study summary around SMART goals and whether or not SMART goals actually were the most effective thing when it came to something that had to do with health and fitness. This is what I'm talking about with information overload. So sometimes I can't even remember what I'm printing out to look at later. However, as somebody who is in the coaching business, who just is constantly taking in more and more information, I feel that same exact pull. I will often be tempted to take the information and then figure out, okay, what can I do with this? Like, whose program can I implement this technique into? What can I kind of tweak with this particular conversation with the next client so that I can put this thing into action? I'm always tempted, or very often tempted, to tweak and try and adjust it so that I can just optimize. And most of the time, what I've actually found is the right move isn't specifically to change anything, it's to actually wait. So, this is where both myself and other folks often are kind of getting it wrong. We're confusing the learning with the immediate need to change, and very often kind of mistaking this novelty for progress. And that definitely is not always the case. I just want to acknowledge that if you're anything like me, it can feel just tough because every new idea feels like evidence that, okay, maybe I was actually missing something with my current way of doing things. So I truly believe that it's not a case of more plans and more techniques and different things that immediately need to be put into place. We quite honestly, I think we would do a lot better if we had fewer and fewer interruptions and distractions. So let's get to a little acronym that I put together for a filter for when you get new information. So if you are a note taker, somebody who wants to kind of jot this down, this would be your point. So if you want to pause and open up your notes file or whatever it may be, or screenshot this right now so that you can come back and listen to it later if you happen to be driving, or actually you probably shouldn't screenshot while you're driving. But so it's a filter called Hold, H-O-L-D. And I had to jot this down so I could remember to keep it in the right order. So when something new shows up, I want you to put it on hold instead of immediately reacting. So here's how hold breaks down. First, H, helpful. So ask yourself, is this actually helpful, or is this just interesting right now? Then the O, is this on plan? So does this support the plan that I'm already committed to? The L is for load. Does this simplify things, or is this just adding additional workload and more complexity to what I'm already doing? And then last is D, delay. Do I need to act on this right now, or can it stay on hold? All right, so I'm going to review this one more time. So first, the overall acronym is HOLD. H, helpful. So asking yourself, is this actually helpful, or is this something that's novel, new, and interesting? Then O, is this on plan? So this does require you having some sort of a specific plan, a target, a goal in place. So you ask yourself, is this on plan? Does this support the plan that I'm already committed to? Then L, load. Is this something that is going to be simplifying things for me? Or is this just adding another layer of complexity, another thing to do? Is this adding another pot to the burner, the four burners on the stove that are already full? And I'm now thinking about just trying to stack more pots on top of the same burner. Like, am I just adding more stuff to do? And then the last letter is D, delay. Do I really need to act on this right now, or can it stay on hold? So remind yourself as you go through that acronym of hold, HOLD, that you're not specifically like, I like the idea of hold, and that's why I put it together, because you're not hanging up on the idea. You're not just cutting the person off completely. Like, think about it like you are a multi-line phone, landline phone, which is going to be wild for anybody who maybe listens to this in the future, because landline phones, folks at certain age bracket, they have no idea what we're talking about. But picture that you are a multi-line phone and somebody calls, and you don't need to necessarily hang up on them. However, you do need to put them on hold for a while. That is completely fine. The key is that you're just not letting them interrupt what's already working and what's already in the flow. So that hold filter really exists so that you can protect the very basic fundamentals of your fitness foundation, which are eat well, sleep enough, and exercise regularly. So when you get that new information that comes your way, that new information only earns a place if it's reinforcing those fitness foundations that you currently have in place, you are currently maintaining, maybe you're building them, maybe you have a specific target that's maybe taking one of them to a new level. Again, however, that new information, it only earns a place if it reinforces the eat well, sleep enough, and exercise regularly fitness foundations. Being able to maintain consistency doesn't always require an upgrade every single day, every single week. Sometimes you got to let it flow for a while. Think about it like your phone. For those of you who may be iPhone users, there may be times where there's a bug or there's a glitch and it requires an update, and they pull one of those out. However, if there was an update every single week, that would be a little bit suspect, right? So typically there's more time in between those updates. So again, remember that hold filter, HOLD, helpful, on plan, load, and delay. All right. So with that, I want to go ahead and bring this episode to a close here. So understand that your ability and your effort that you're putting in, I should say, to stay the course is not something that's completely passive. Like, you don't just sit back and relax and stay the course. Staying the course, if you picture it like a plane that's in the sky, that still requires some subtle like tweaks of the wheel or the control, whatever it's called. If you're in the sea and you're navigating the ocean, you don't just let the wheel kind of do its thing. You still have to periodically kind of go left, go right, just little subtle changes. When you're driving on the highway, regardless of the autonomous vehicles that are out there, those autonomous vehicles, even if you have your hands off the wheel, you still have to set that system and set a course to where that vehicle is going. And it likely will periodically need to switch some lanes, but it's never, hopefully, never going off the road. So remember that if you are truly staying the course, that is something that you will still need to be focused and selective about. So you can stay curious, you can still keep learning. I'm not saying to ignore and not take in new information. It's a matter of understanding that not every new piece of information, new idea has to be implemented right away or even ever. So run it through your filter, address see, does it address the foundational things that you are currently keeping in place, and then act accordingly. So you just don't have to act on everything completely immediately. So that's what I wanted to take some time to talk to you about today. All right. I hope that you found this helpful and actionable, especially as we are closing out. If you're listening to this in real time, closing out the month of January, getting into the month of February 2026. I don't know about you all. It feels for me like January flew by. And if you've listened to previous episodes here on Help Me Understand about my approach to the new year, or you happen to listen to my other podcast that I co host with my friend Kelly Lutz called Lifting, Running, and Living with Kelly and JK, I don't set a ton of very specific intentions in January. I wait until February. I use January as my month to assess and build some momentum. And then February is that's where things really kick off for me. So I'll share that in future episodes, what I'm working on, because that'll be kicking off this upcoming Sunday, February 1st. So it's perfect. It's the start of a week and the start of, for me, it's when I really get into my goal achievement season, as one of my friends calls it in coaching. So hopefully this was helpful for you. And by helpful, I mean you believe that there is something that you can take action on, even if that action is to put this information on hold. So I'm going to live it just like I talk it. All right. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. If you have feedback, questions, anything along those lines, feel free to reach out to me. Instagram is one way. That's at Coach JK McLeod. McLeod is spelled MCLEOD. JK is spelled just like it sounds, the letter J and the letter K. Just put a coach in front of all that. Or you can email me, jk@jkmcleod.com. All right. Thanks again for listening. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.